Hey there, all you true crime fans. I'm Amanda,
And I'm Corey.
and welcome back to Colorado Crime. Thanks for being here today with us. Let's start with a little bit of humor before we discuss today's tragic case.
Okay, please excuse me. I have a cold. It's not COVID. I checked. Um, what's the best way to watch a fly fishing tournament?
What?
Live stream.
Have you ever been fly fishing?
Once when I was married to my ex-husband. It's not a thrill for me. I hate fishing it, honestly. If we're gonna
Same.
if we're gonna lay it all out there, I don't like it. I don't like the calmness of it. I don't like the throwing the thing in. I don't like catching the fish. I don't like any of it. So,
I don't either, but I do like to watch fly fishing.
mm,
They get to wear those cool rubber pants.
mm. My
I like
sister
that.
Annie really enjoys ice fishing and fishing in
Oh,
general.
mm,
I do not enjoy any of that in general.
no, me either.
No,
But I would
not
like
for
to
me.
wear rubber pants.
Well, I mean, you could wear rubber pants and walk around in the water, but that makes fishermen angry for some reason.
Yeah, they don't really like that.
No,
Sorry, fishermen. Me
sorry,
stomping
fishermen.
around in my rubber pants. So we started the Manson series a while back, and guys, I swear I have been hard at work on this case, but so far it's huge. And so we're on episode 3, and I just want to make sure that I have like all of the facts straight and that I include like all of the pertinent information. So it's just taking me a little bit longer than expected, but I'm hoping to have it done for next week. So we'll see how that goes. This episode that I'm working on, there's 7 victims between the 2 crime scenes, and they all deserve the time to be remembered. So I never want to just release anything just to have something to be released. We want to make sure that you guys leave here learning something new or feeling like you know the victims like we do, and of course, with a better understanding. So just know there will be a conclusion coming soon. Corey, do you have any updates for us?
I see that they found the remains of Suzanne Morphew.
Which I am so interested in.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. And it's not double jeopardy, in case anybody wants to know. The prosecution actually dismissed the charges against her husband without prejudice, so they can refile again.
Heck yeah, they can. And I hope,
Mm-hmm.
whether it was her husband, which I think it was,
Me
allegedly,
too.
don't come for us. But I do hope that there's a conclusion to that case.
Yep. Now that they have the remains, that makes things a lot better.
Yeah. Yeah. So they're not doing any kind of a press release, but when there is more information, we will definitely get it out to you guys.
Yep.
Cool. Well, let's go ahead and jump into this week's episode. Today, we're going to be discussing the murder of a young boy. So, as always, listener discretion is advised. This is the sad story of a teen boy, his dad, and the pictures that drove his dad to commit murder. Dylan Nicholas Redwine was born on February 6, 1999 in Denver, Colorado. He would have been 24 years old today, but Dylan was taken from this world between November 18th and November 19th of 2012, when he was just 13 years young. And the perpetrator? His father, Mark Redwine. Dylan was described by friends as friendly, outgoing, sometimes short-tempered, and loyal. He didn't hesitate to offer words of comfort when necessary, but was also known as a prankster. He had a brother who was 7 years older than him, who was named Corey, and the two were best friends. Corey even took on a fatherly role when it came to Dylan due to the difficult relationship the boys had with their father. Dylan grew up in a small town named Bayfield and continued to live there even after his parents divorced in 2007. I have to breathe. In 2011, after Elaine remarried, the family moved to Colorado Springs. Dylan had tons of friends in Colorado Springs and was very well adjusted. Prior to the tension, Mark was actually a very attentive and good father. He even stayed home with Dylan when he was younger for a bit, leading to a very close relationship. The closeness ended after the divorce, and distant and difficult was how the relationship was described. Mark was physically and emotionally distant and rarely took advantage of his visitation rights with the boys. When Mark did spend time with his sons, he spent most of the time belittling and degrading their mother. This only furthered the tension between Mark and Dylan. In 2010, Dylan would witness his father's explosive temper after a disagreement and would never fully see his father the same again. This was not the only thing that Dylan would discover about his father.
Dylan had been required by law to have custodial visits with his father for years. Visits that he had asked a judge to end after he and his brother Cody discovered some disturbing pictures of their father during a road trip in June of 2011. The discovery of the pictures would permanently alter the father-son relationship. We will discuss these pictures more in depth later on in the episode. The courts mandated that Dylan visit his father for Thanksgiving of 2012, a visit he tried several times to get out of. Elaine, not wanting to be held in contempt of court, did what she was forced to do and packed her son up and sent him to visit his father on November 18th, 2012. When Dylan landed in Bayfield, Colorado, he sent his mother a sad face emoji.
Mark Allen Redwine was born on August 24, 1961. He lived in La Plata County, which is a rugged, mountainous area in southwest Colorado, and he was a truck driver. He'd been divorced twice and was currently in the midst of a custody battle over Dylan. His relationship with his oldest son was over. Court had confronted Mark about the photos he discovered, photos that painted Mark in a shitty light, so to speak. Mark retrieved Dylan from the airport on November 18, 2012. Dylan and Mark were seen on video surveillance footage at Walmart and McDonald's after leaving the airport. The footage showed that the two had very little interaction with each other and showed that Dylan was safe and unharmed. The two then went back to Mark's home located at 2343 County Road 500, and that was the last time Dylan was seen alive.
Dylan had been texting his friend, Ryan Nava, and asked to stay at the friend's house. Mark denied this request, and the boys made plans to meet at Ryan's grandmother's house the following morning at 6:30 a.m. The last contact anyone had with Dylan was at 9:37 p.m. on the evening of the 18th, after Ryan and Dylan had made their plans. Ryan and Dylan had been best friends since they were little boys and stayed close even after Dylan moved away. Dylan was texting another friend of his, Amanda Saxton, while he was at his father's home. The two were discussing what they were currently up to, but the conversation abruptly ended after Dylan told Amanda he was watching Adventureland and then never responded again. The last activity on his phone was a text message from his mom, Elaine, around 10 p.m., and it said, "How are you, son? Doing okay?" This text message was never answered. Mark stated that the two of them arrived home, threw a Nerf football around for a bit, then watched a movie that the two had purchased at Walmart. Mark claimed to have gone to bed around 9:30ish, but said Dylan was still awake. When Dylan didn't arrive at 6:30 a.m., his friend sent a text message at 6:46 a.m. asking where Dylan was. No response was ever received. Mark claimed he woke up around 5:45 a.m. to start his day. He was supposed to take Dylan to Ryan's grandma's house around 6:30, but Dylan was still sleeping. At 7:30 a.m., he said he tried to wake Dylan, who was sleeping on the couch, but had no luck, so he got in his truck and headed to meet his attorney. Mark sent 4 text messages to Dylan on November 19th. The first was at 8:14 a.m. and it said, "Hey bud, out of the office, call me." And at 8:15 a.m. saying, "Call me please." Mark texted again at 11:23 and said, "Dylan, I'm home and you're nowhere to be found. Come home so I can get you to Bayfield. At least call me, okay?" Mark sent a final message at 2:33 and it said, "Dylan, you need to call me. Where are you?" All these messages went unanswered. Cell phone data shows that during the time he was sending these messages, that Mark traveled from his home to Durango and then from Durango to home. Mark called Dylan 7 times. The last call on November 19th was placed at 9:32 p.m. He attempted to call Dylan at 7:19 a.m. on the morning of November 20th, but that was his final attempt to ever contact his son. No further calls or texts would be placed from Mark to Dylan. Could this be because Mark knew Dylan would never respond? He established his alibi, covered his tracks, and he knew his son was dead, so he didn't need to keep up the facade.
At 4:32 p.m. on November 19th, the day that Dylan disappeared, Mark texted Elaine and said, Elaine, I'm wondering if you've heard from Dylan. I've been trying to reach him all afternoon. Elaine immediately responded back. It's really worrying when I'm 7 hours away and I get a message like this from you. I haven't heard from Dylan today. Where did you leave him or last see him? Mark responded 7 minutes later and said that he had gone into town earlier that morning, and when he left, Dylan was fine. But he was worried because he couldn't reach him. Elaine responded, he wouldn't just leave. He would have called me. I'm so suspicious of you right now. How could he just disappear? Mark told Elaine that he had just left the marshal's office where he reported Dylan missing. Mind you, this was around 4:30 p.m. on the day that Dylan went missing. But Elaine called the marshal's office and they had no report of a missing boy. They didn't know anything about Dylan. Mark had never reported his son missing. Ryan Nava did say that Mark went to his house looking for Dylan and that Mark had reached out to some of Dylan's other friends, but that was it. Elaine was at her home in Colorado Springs and she was panicked. She immediately called Corey and asked if he had spoken to Dylan, but Corey had not. She packed a bag and left her home with her new husband and Corey, and they headed to Bayfield around 5:30 p.m. They arrived in Bayfield around 2:30 a.m. and went straight to the marshal's office. Elaine discovered that Mark had, in fact, reported their son missing. Just maybe not in the time he told her. Dylan Redwine was reported missing by his father, Mark Redwine, around 6:30 p.m. on November 19th, almost 2 hours after he told his ex-wife he had reported Dylan missing. In the missing persons report, Mark claimed that he arrived home after 11:30 a.m. and found a bowl of cereal in the sink and Nickelodeon on TV, but Dylan was nowhere to be found. When deputies arrived at Mark's home, they were greeted by a very disheveled Mark and several liquor bottles. When deputies asked for a scent item to give to the canine to help find Dylan, Mark told them that there was nothing like that in the home. Deputies found this odd, since the boy had supposedly spent the night in the home. The canine could have used anything Dylan touched: a charger, a toothbrush, an article of clothing. But again, Mark said that nothing like that was in the home that had belonged to Dylan. Finally, Mark led the deputies to a sofa that Dylan had allegedly slept on. The canine was given a pillow, but, to the deputies' surprise, the canine didn't pick up Dylan's scent. First responders searched for Dylan until 1 a.m. They were outside in the mountainous terrain looking for any sign of the missing 13-year-old boy. By 11 p.m., deputies noticed the house was dark and all of the lights had been turned off. Mark did not join in the large search party that was just outside his home, looking for his own son. A neighbor later went to police to report a strange observation she had made. In the early morning hours of November 19th, around 2 a.m., the neighbor noticed Mark Redwine's front porch light on. The neighbor found this odd because Mark typically turned the lights off each night. After she awoke for the day, she made a point to check the light. It was off. Someone had turned the light on in the middle of the night. On the same night, a little boy went missing and had to have been awake to turn it off by morning time. How would someone who went to bed at 10 p.m. at the latest have turned on the light, and more importantly, what did he need the light for? Unless he left in the middle of the night.
Searches began around 7 a.m. the morning of the 20th. This time they were joined by Elaine, her new husband, and her son Corey. Mark was still not part of the searches. He did, however, watch from his porch with a cup of coffee in his hand. The only help Mark offered was a theory that Dylan had gone fishing on the day that he disappeared, and maybe he had run away or was met with foul play. He told investigators he had searched the home high and low for Dylan's fishing pole, but it was nowhere to be found. Dylan loved to be outside. It was his favorite place to be, but fishing wasn't a big hobby of his. He hadn't even learned to tie his own lure yet. Something you'll need to know how to do if you decide to go fishing alone. Months after Dylan's disappearance, Mark found Dylan's fishing pole in his garage. Days after Dylan was reported missing, reports began to surface of disturbing comments made by Mark. He told his first wife, Betsy Horvath, that if he ever needed to get rid of a body, he would leave it out in the mountains. It also was released that Mark told Betsy during their divorce proceedings that he would kill the kids before he'd let her have them. Immediately following the report of Dylan's disappearance, searches were set up all over the mountain town in hopes to find even a tiny shred of evidence. On November 24th, cadaver dogs picked up Dylan's scent about 9 miles away from Mark's home on the edge of Valsita Reservoir. Divers and sonar were brought in, but nothing belonging to Dylan nor Dylan himself were recovered. On November 25th, La Plata County Sheriff's Office called in the FBI. On November 26th, Special Agent Grusing, who we've talked about before, traveled from his office in Denver to Bayfield to meet with Mark Redwine. During their first meeting, Special Agent Grusing asked Mark to write a free narrative about the time before Dylan went missing. He was looking for areas of inconsistency as well as areas of the story that were particularly detailed or vague. Mark wrote about how the two had gone to McDonald's and Walmart and how when they returned home, they tossed the football around. Mark then wrote that he and Dylan had been roughhousing on the night before the disappearance, and Special Agent Grusing asked if maybe the roughhousing got a little too wild and Dylan was hurt. Mark denied that Dylan was hurt at all and wrote about how happy the interaction made him, and it felt like him and Dylan could repair their relationship. On November 27th, Special Agent Grusing visited the Redwine home for a second time. This time he was met by a disheveled Mark who had red eyes and was clutching the supposed pillow that Dylan had slept on. The pillow that the scent dogs couldn't pick up Dylan's scent on. In fact, none of the dogs were able to pick up Dylan's scent from the pillow. Dylan's scent was picked off from a hat and t-shirt that Elaine had brought with her from Colorado Springs. On November 29th, Special Agent Grusing went back to Mark's home for a third visit. That was also the day that the search warrant was executed. Special Agent Grusing took Mark in for questioning and specifically asked if Dylan had been injured. This was when Mark changed his story for the first time. He told Special Agent Grusing that Dylan had actually had a cold sore on his lip and that it was oozing and bleeding. This way, he was able to explain why Dylan's blood would eventually be found in his home. S.A. Grusing told Mark that he was going to confirm the using cold story with Elaine, as she had seen Dylan on the same day, and Mark changed his story for the second time. He backtracked and said it wasn't actually Dylan with a cold sore, but it was someone else. Dylan had actually been injured while he was at Mark's. When they arrived home, they were playing with a Nerf football, and it hit Dylan in the lip, and he dripped blood on the floor. This is why you shouldn't play football in the house. The third story came when Mark changed the blood drip to now Dylan actually spat blood all over the floor because Nerf footballs are so damaging. During the same interview, they're kind of hard, you don't know. Special Agent Grusing asked about bears in the area. This is when Mark perked up and began talking about how there were bears in the area and maybe Dylan was taken by a bear. Mark almost became excited at the idea.
Which is like totally baffling to me. So I am terrified of bears. Like me and bears are totally on the outs right now.
Really?
And
Have you seen that video of that bear on the table and the mom like shielding the son from the bear eating their enchiladas on the table?
no, but I mean, can you blame the bear? Enchiladas are delicious.
Yeah.
No, I sort of avoid bear attacks because
Well,
I
I
really
mean, well, yeah.
well, like watching videos of them and stuff. Like I really am afraid of bears. But like a bear attack is very messy. It's loud, it's painful, it's gory, it's aggressive. And like it is 1000% not the fate that a parent would ever want their
No.
kid to encounter.
No.
And also, bears begin like typically, I mean, not every bear, can't speak for all bears. Bear lives matter. But like typically, bears begin to hibernate in like mid October to the beginning of November. And this was mid November. So had Dylan actually been attacked by a bear during the day in mid November, he would have been like one of the most unlucky people. And
Yeah,
furthermore, bears don't drag their food that far. Like they're total scavengers and they will eat what they come across, but they're not gonna like
no.
kill something and drag it.
No.
But I digress. Let me get off my bear soapbox here.
Okay.
So back to the search warrant. So Dylan's blood was found in multiple areas of Mark Redwine's home. It was found on the sofa, the floor, the coffee table, the floor in front of the love seat itself, and underneath a rug, meaning there was no blood found on the rug. So it was apparent that somebody had attempted to clean the blood due to how diluted it was when it was found. So, what would make a father so angry that he would murder his own son? Well, do you remember those pictures that we mentioned earlier in the episode? Mark took Dylan and Corey on a road trip to Michigan over Father's Day in 2010. They'd gone to a baseball games and they seemed to be having a good time. Mark was napping in the hotel room and Dylan was bored, so he began using the computer. This is when Dylan came across something so disgusting, so disturbing, so jarring that they caused Dylan and Corey to completely disassociate from their father. You can find these online if you want to see them. They're awful. But they're selfies that Mark Redwine took of himself in women's lingerie wearing
Which
makeup.
which those two things are fine together. Like if you want to wear women's lingerie and wear makeup, we're not saying you shouldn't. Please do so.
No. That's not even the bad part.
No, it gets worse.
And
No, that's not the bad part. Yeah.
Yeah,
Those two things are not the bad part.
So he was wearing a diaper. And like, it sounds weird. Like the diaper, who wears that? Well, it gets even more weird when I tell you that the diaper that Mark was wearing was actually filled with feces.
Gross.
His own feces. And the pictures go from weird to flat out repulsive when a photo depicts Mark Redwine eating the feces from the diaper. The feces appears to be smeared all over his face, his nose, his beard, everywhere. And Mark looks to be having like the best time ever. So the boys took the computer to the bathroom, and there, Corey, the older brother, took pictures with his phone. Seeing the photos from an investigative stance is off-putting enough, but imagine being a 12-year-old little boy and seeing these of your own father. From that moment on, Dylan lost all respect and admiration he had for his father. It was replaced with disgust and embarrassment. And it's worth noting here that Elaine didn't know about these pictures until after Dylan went missing.
Sometime after the Michigan trip, Corey and Mark had a falling out. Corey was an adult, so he no longer was required by law to spend time with his father. Dylan, however, wasn't as lucky. Dylan was forced to go with Mark on another trip in August of 2012, 3 months before his disappearance. During the trip, Mark began complaining to Dylan about his brother and mother being bad influences and bad role models for him. Dylan was clearly upset by this. Dylan called and texted Corey repeatedly and asked 7 times for the poop pics of Papa because he was going to show his father who the real bad influence was. Corey knew it would only add fuel to the fire, so he never sent the pictures. For 7 months, Dylan remained a missing person. During this time, Mark denied any and all involvement in his son's disappearance. Mark, Elaine, and Corey even went on the Dr. Phil show. Dr. Phil asked Mark Redwine to take a polygraph, which Mark refused. During their Dr. Phil appearance, Mark accused Elaine of having something to do with Dylan's disappearance. Mark was calm and emotionless as Elaine pleaded with him to tell her where their son was. During another search for Dylan, another search that Mark was not a part of, Michael Hall, Elaine's husband and Dylan's stepfather, was present and helping. He had to use the bathroom, so he drove a few miles away to Middle Mountain Road, a secluded road that closed annually on November 30th. This was the middle of April in 2013. The road was technically still closed due to snow, so Michael wasn't expecting to run into anyone. This road was well off the beaten path, so he was especially surprised to run into Mark Redwine, who was driving down the road in his Dodge pickup. Don't get confused, though. He was not driving down the road as part of the search party. He was not looking for his son. Michael followed Mark back to where the road's pavement ends. He thought it was odd and suspicious that he actually installed trail cameras to watch the area to see if Mark returned and why.
On June 26, 2013, the partial remains of Dylan Redwine were found in a wooded area off Middle Mountain Road. Several bones, 1 shoe, 1 sock, scraps of a t-shirt, and an earbud were found. Dylan's skull was not present with the body. On August 14th, 2013, a canine handler was brought into the La Plata County Sheriff's Office to have her dog Molly search 3 evidence bags. Molly was a cadaver dog and was trained to pick up the scent of decomposition. These evidence bags contained the clothing Mark Redwine was wearing when Dylan disappeared. Molly hit on all 3 bags. Molly was then taken to Mark Redwine's home, where she signaled near the garage. Inside the home, Molly signaled 7 times on the main floor and 0 times upstairs. She also signaled the scent of human remains in the back of Mark Redwine's truck. And lastly, she signaled several times for the scent of human remains on Middle Mountain Road.
In 2016, Mark Redwine threw out a large amount of items. As it applies to abandoned property, police have all legal right to gather the discarded items and search them. It was discovered that Mark threw away pictures of Dylan. His son was confirmed to be deceased at this point, and pictures of Elaine. These are pictures and times he will never get back. His son can't repose a picture to recreate it later in life. That chance is gone. Mark Redwine willingly threw out the most recent pictures of his son like they were trash. On November 1st, 2015, 2 hikers were hiking on Middle Mountain Road when they discovered what appeared to be a human skull. It was confirmed to be Dylan's. It was found about 1.5 miles away from the other remains. Dylan's skull had cut marks on it, as well as a recent skull fracture. Dylan's wallet, iPod, and cell phone have never been found.
Mark Redwine was arrested in Washington State in 2017 and charged with second-degree murder and child abuse resulting in death. On October 8, 2021, after several delays due to the coronavirus, Mark Redwine was sentenced to the maximum term of 48 years in prison. At sentencing, the judge stated, quote, "As the father, it's your obligation to protect your son. Keep him from harm. Instead of that, you inflicted enough injury on him to kill him in your living room." End quote. Mark Allen Redwine will be eligible for parole in July of 2052 at the age of 91.
I'm glad they finally figured out it was him. It sucks that it took so long.
I know, he got a lot of time outside of prison after his son was murdered.
I don't know how you could live with yourself.
I don't know. I don't know either. And then to almost to go on to Dr. Phil, that feels like almost taunting to me.
Yeah. He was like, ha ha.
Yeah, and you're drinking your coffee as you're watching the hordes of people searching for your son.
Yeah.
And you're sitting there just like drinking coffee, watching them like, carry on.
Yeah. I'm not helping you.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of shitty.
It's just a bad
Pun intended.
Yeah, that's gross.
Yeah, that is gross. Gross. In some other news, remember the Long Island serial killer?
He got a haircut.
Well, okay. But he would like his 280 guns back so he can sell them to help his family while he's in jail.
280
280. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Wow.
Yeah. The guns have significant financial value, says his attorney, and could be sold to provide temporarily but urgent needed respite from the financial hardships affecting the Howerman family. Yeah.
I don't know how I feel about that.
Yeah. I don't know either. And his attorney's last name is Capone, which I find amusing. Yeah, so
Did you see in the Delphi case that Richard Allen is claiming that it was like a Nordic cult that did the slayings of Abby and Libby?
No. I mean, cults are prevalent, but
I will say so much of that case has been kept very close to the chest that this motion for a Franks hearing was released, and like a lot of it came out that there definitely were there was staging happening at the crime scene, and there was definitely like symbols and stuff found. But I don't know that I'd go as far as to say like
it's a cult.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, just very interesting. I feel like there's those cases that, like, every case you want to see solved, but, like, that's such a big one for me.
Mhm.
Those poor little girls and their poor families.
Yeah.
I hate cases involving kids. This one was especially hard.
Yeah, it sucks.
It's just
I
I
mean,
don't like to
everybody has
cover
those
cases
moments where
with
you wanna murder your child, but you don't actually do it.
Right. Right. And I just think if you knew your kid didn't wanna see you, and that's where it gets frustrating too, is they had he had told people that he didn't wanna see his dad,
Right.
but he was required to by law, and
Yep.
his poor mom she couldn't do anything. She had to send him.
I know. That part's sucky too, that we force kids to go with parents that they don't wanna see.
Yes. And I don't think we should do that. There needs to be something changed where the child does have say.
Right.
Because this whole thing would have been avoided had he not been required to see his dad,
Yep.
which is really sad. All right, crime fans. Well, until next time. Thanks so much for joining us today. If you haven't already, please subscribe so you can be notified every time we upload. If you enjoy listening to us every week, please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to your podcasts. New episodes are released every Friday at 10:30 a.m. Mountain Standard Time. Please follow us on Instagram at Colorado Crime Pod or on Facebook at the Colorado Crime Podcast for information on next week's episode, as well as other true crime happenings. We hope that you have a beautiful day wherever you are, and as always, stay safe.
Until next time, podcastians, have the weekend you deserve.